Here in the United States, whenever a new concept of transportation pops up, the reactions are almost always a melting pot. There are those of us that are charged up more than ever at this new and exciting idea that sort of puts the humdrum of everyday life into the past. And then there are those who can't quite embrace the idea of something new. They just let the ideas fall flat, if you will. However, just suppose within this ever-expanding and evolving world of ours that there exists a brand new electric vehicle that provides elements of performance, luxury, and in most cases is considerably less expensive than a lot of its competition. You may not believe me if I told you that at first, but rest assured, it's here. To anyone out there who might have contemplated recently the idea of driving and or owning one of these newfangled electric cars, well, I think I can best describe how one might feel. And it's through the words of the ever-comedic Mr. Adam Ferrara, who on the original US version of Top Gear once said, "It's like you're missing one of your senses." And I can absolutely understand why someone like him, let alone any average Joe like me, would say that. Because as most of us are used to the idea of internal combustion engines or even hybrids, the notion that you don't hear any kind of engine noise and instead you just get this Jetsons-like whir under the car when you start driving it, it totally fools you. And it definitely did for me when this thing got dropped off at my house a week ago. Now, I will admit, I am one that is not completely and totally sold on the idea of EVs. I know they have found success in a lot of other places across the globe, but here in America, I just don't think we're ready for them yet. However, would I say that this new Genesis GV60 is the absolute worst one in the bunch? By far and away, no. Because this car, at over $70,000 base MSRP for this example here, it has more than just a lot to offer. And when I say a lot, I don't just mean what an EV means for the future. I'm talking more so about how it makes you feel as a driver. Now, despite the fact that this one is lavishly appointed, as anyone would expect from one of the world's fastest growing luxury brands, but this car aptly is the performance model. And most people who have driven EVs know one thing: there is no hesitation when it comes to having some fun. And even though this is not the fastest Korean EV to ever come to market, with that title belonging to the Kia EV6 GT with almost 580 all-wheel drive powered electric horsepower, this, with a meager 483 all-electric horsepower and 446 pound-feet of instantaneous electric torque, is more than enough. Now, that is all thanks to the fact that, just like the EV6, this car is all-wheel drive, with not one, but two 160 kilowatt electric motors at each end. It's powered with a direct drive transmission sitting atop a 77.4 kilowatt per hour lithium-ion battery cell. And if you really want to play with its personality, just go down here to the steering wheel where this silver little almost nitrous button resides, and you can go from, you know, laid back, relaxed, and just more elegant modes like eco or comfort, or you can really crank up the speed by putting this thing in sport mode and going over to the other side of the wheel where this nuclear green button resides that is labeled boost. And what that does is basically the equivalent of overclocking your computer's graphics card. It will unleash absolutely everything the battery and electric motors have to offer for about 10 seconds. But I think that's more than enough to light a fire in your underwear, if you ask me. Oh my God! Oh, I'm in a rocket ship! Holy cow! And as much fun as it is getting my head launched into the stratosphere, well, there is another little voice in the back of my mind that keeps coming up, and it's called range anxiety. Because unlike an internal combustion engine, as we know, which can kind of warn you through its ever-present gas gauge when you might need to pull over and spend 5 minutes at the pump, you know, putting about, what, $40 worth of gas in your car, this thing just has this little battery in the lower corner of your gauges, and it ever steadily seems to go down every time you go near the gas pedal, or I guess you might say throttle in this case. And to prove the point of how quickly this car can go through an entire charge, I took a trip from the north side of Houston here in Kingwood all the way down to the south side to NRG Stadium for the Houston Auto Show, and I used over 3/4 of this car's power supply. And going back to that whole gas station thing, instead of spending 5 minutes at the pump when I had to inevitably recharge this car, I had to spend almost an hour sitting still just for this car to recuperate only about 85% of its battery. That is completely pointless, and even more so if you think about taking a car like this on a road trip. You would never want to, because you would have to stop so much more frequently than you would if you had an internal combustion engine. Something to think about. Okay, enough of the negativity. This being a Genesis, I will say its best attribute is just driving normally. You don't have to put your foot down to experience what the Genesis brand has sought ever since it came out in 2017. This car is incredibly smooth. It is even more agile than I thought, with the all-wheel drive system weighting up very nicely through the electric steering, as if anything else in this car needs to be electric aside from its powertrain. But the steering is just, it's beautiful. At slower speeds, it's soft, it's nice and comforting. It's not exactly one-finger steering, but it's so nice to drive. But I'll tell you, there is a slight annoyance as well when you're up to freeway speeds like I am right now. You get a heck of a lot more noise coming from the tires, and you can hear everything around you, which even though it's 70 miles an hour like I'm doing right now, you don't necessarily have to shout to have a conversation. You can pretty much hear anyone that drives by you at the same speed, if not faster. And if you think this spaceship-like noise is the weirdest sound that the GV60 makes, there is another one, and it comes about when you start backing up. Now, in my eyes, a vehicle's design should be a direct reflection of the way it performs on the road. And if the driving experience that we felt earlier should be anything to go by, then the GV60 has hit things almost on the bullseye. I say almost because in the back of my mind, I do know that this car shares a direct platform relation with the Hyundai Ioniq 5 and the Kia EV6. But apart from that, that is where this relationship ends, because not only was this car built to be an EV from the get-go, but it was built to be a Genesis product through and through, right down to the absolute tongue twister of a color that we have on this test car here with the Atacama Copper. Trust me, I tried saying it 5 times fast and it doesn't work. But when you start looking a little closer past some of what I would call the uglier details, like the gaping maw of a grille that's not really open, to be honest, there's not really much of any kind of cooling going on here, and even less when you factor in the active grille shutters that aid in this car's aerodynamics, and maybe that kind of bulbousy nose going on up here. The details do reflect where Genesis has gone within the past couple of years, like the split level LED headlights. I say headlights, but they're high beams, low beams, and turn signals all melded into one split level unit. Auto high beam assist, well, that's already a given. But within the grille, however, you have a lot more going on here. Front and rear park assist, well, you already got that. Adaptive radar cruise control, that's a given too. Things like forward collision warning, rear collision warning, and even rear emergency braking are all thrown in as standard here on this test car. Same thing with the 360 camera, which you might be surprised to find where those cameras are actually placed and not just here in the front. Now, despite its platform relation to the Ioniq 5 and the EV6, this car, at 178 inches long, give or take a tenth or two, is actually the smallest of the Korean EV trio. Kind of funny, right? But get this, it is 4 inches shorter than an Ioniq 5, and it's right around a half a foot shorter than an EV6. I know every inch counts, but I find it so ironic that out of all of these, the most premium of the bunch is the smallest in the family. However, what is not small in this car is what is down here. On this performance model, you get 21-inch wheels. I know, hard to believe, and they look 21 inches in size despite its diminutive stature overall. I love the look of these. They look kind of like a metallic snowflake. I know that's kind of a weird analogy, but underneath the brakes, massive calipers with these huge discs. Of course, the multiple settings for the regenerative braking, all included as standard, and these are wrapped in 255/40 series Michelin all-season tires. And if you really want your EV to be a total tech fest, then the GV60 may very well fit the bill. Now, I'm starting off the party tricks by standing a little far away here because the first of them has to do with the GV60's standard advanced keyless access system. And just look at the key fob for this, very reminiscent of the one I had on the Genesis G90, except it's in black, not in white, and that reveals the beautiful geometric design inside of the key. It looks like a crystal sculpture, if you will, and you could see, well, 8 different buttons on the key fob. Normally there's just 4, like lock, unlock, power tailgate, and panic, but this one takes things a step further. You can open the charge door, you can remote start it, and you can even have it park itself. But if you think that's cool, you ain't seen nothing yet. I have the key, and I'm not gonna touch any part of this car, and watch. It just automatically opened for me. You notice I didn't hit the unlock button, nothing. I just had this fob near the car, and automatically the door handles pop out of the side so you can get in, and then the power folding mirrors automatically extend outward. And they're not just power folding, they have a camera in each one, and they have puddle lamps that will project the Genesis logo right down in front of the door. And while crazy keyless access is always a nice thing to have, one other thing that caught my eye is the glass roof on this particular car. Now, it's not full length for obvious reasons. You gotta have some kind of structure there so it doesn't connect the top of the windshield with the top of the rear hatch here, but nonetheless, it is a very sizable piece of glass up here, and I love the way that the shade opens on the inside. Instead of it rolling back like, you know, maybe your blinds at home, it splits right in the middle, thus revealing a more elegant way to see through the roof. And while its face may speak to the more elegant mind, there's something about the rear of the GV60 that seems to have a little bit more of an aggressive stance to it, something with a whiff of sportiness to it. I don't know, let me guess. Well, it probably has to do, for one, with that gloss black spoiler that, as I mentioned on the drive, creates a huge blind spot by splitting that rear windshield. However, you look more into the details, it is a direct representation of the front, and again, an embellishment on Genesis's current design philosophy. Things like the taillights, they're very curvaceous for one. I love how they kind of curve upward a little bit as you look at it from certain angles. Full LED as you would expect. You even have an LED light bar that is integrated across said rear spoiler. You have the reverse camera hidden in the back as well, and you can tell this is a Genesis product even without the name being spelled out in pretty decent sized letters across the trunk. But as with all Hyundai and Kia products, thus extending into the Genesis line, there are certain things back here that I think most people enjoy already, like the hands-free smart trunk. Once the hatch opens, however, you'll find that the cargo capacity is, well, average at best, at least when you look at the numbers on paper. With the rear seats in place, you're looking at 24 cubic feet of cargo volume. Doesn't sound like a lot, but again, considering the size of the car, it is, well, average, but not the best either. You look under the floor, you've got a nice little bit of storage space for all your electric vehicle goodies, like your charging cable and even a tire mobility kit, because who needs a spare nowadays? And if somehow you feel that's not enough, you take out this rear cargo cover, you fold down those 60/40 split fold rear seats, and you're looking at 54.7 cubic feet of usable cargo volume. Sounds like plenty, but when you compare it to some of the other EVs on the market in terms of the grand scheme of things, it really is just middle of the road, despite as much as it costs. Now, while the kingpins from mainland Europe and even from Japan have demonstrated time and time again how to make a luxury vehicle the very best it could possibly be, when it comes to electric vehicles, or even luxury EVs for that matter, not all of them know how to put the best face on things, at least upon initial impressions from the outside. However, it takes a true niche vehicle to make you feel genuinely special, and that is how I've been feeling sitting inside of the GV60. And in fact, it's how I feel about a lot of modern Genesis products, the ones that I've driven recently, because in this example, with this glacier white and ash leather going on pretty much everywhere, with the metallic accents in the middle and just the way everything is presented, it is absolutely gorgeous in here. However, despite how nice it looks, I do have one problem with this particular car's interior. It's not the quilted patterned, leather-bound, heated and ventilated seats, because those are a joy to sit on, and I would absolutely do, well, as many miles as the electric motors and battery can take me in this car. But my problem is the steering wheel. Now, it's not how it looks or the fact that it's thick and soft and just a joy to feel in your hands, giggity. It's the fact that it is wrapped in the same color as the seats. Now, I have no problem with lighter colored steering wheels, but this one is so light, I can only imagine how it's going to look after thousands and thousands of miles worth of use with body oils and dirt and any kind of soiling you could think of. And after all of that, I could just not even wrap my mind around how hard it's going to be to keep this thing clean over time. However, look past that and things kind of simplify a little bit, although it is presented in a very fashionable way. All the buttons on the wheel are much larger, also adorned with nice little triggers for like your volume, different cruise control settings, and also the information adjuster for your gauge cluster. But one thing that I love about this particular car is the fact you don't have to hunt and peck to turn on certain features. For example, my favorite one is the highway driving assist. It's one button. You don't need to tap, like I said, a whole bunch of buttons to activate all this car's driving safety features. You push the one button, things like lane tracing, adaptive radar, forward collision warning, etc., all spring to life in one instant. And I absolutely love that. On top of that, you may be wondering what these paddles are doing here on the back of the wheel. This car has a direct drive transmission and it has no gas engine, so why would you need them? Well, those are there to control the strength of the auto regenerative braking. Now, with the luxury box checked, let's take a look at the GV60's technology, because as I was saying with other modern Genesis cars that I've driven recently, these things are stuffed to the hilt with technology aplenty. I mean, you look everywhere and there's something to catch the eye. Now, not all of it may be the most innovative thing you've ever seen in anyone's book. However, take for example this curved display at the top of the dash. Does that design kind of look familiar? Well, it does to me, because it looks like they stole a page out of Cadillac's book, and this is not the only car to do it. The new Kia EV9 has exactly the same thing going on. However, inside of those screens, it's very much up to date. The one in front of you, well, that's obvious. That's your gauge cluster. Full digital display with every piece of information you could want. The other one, however, is your infotainment. And it is the most complicated system I've ever tested in, frankly, any luxury car out there on the market. Because While most infotainment systems in a lot of everyday cars give you, I don't know, 5 tabs with navigation, which this has, and it is definitely not dated. It operates just like the most modern smartphone you could think of. And you might get, you know, audio, Bluetooth, vehicle settings, and general settings just to tie it all together. But this has like 4 different pages of tabs to go through to tailor everything in this car exactly how you want it. From seeing how your EV system's doing, to leaving a voice memo, to even putting it in quiet mode, which frankly, when I tried that, it was one of the most serene experiences I ever had. Or even delving deeper by having a full 3-dimensional display of the car presented to you, which functions with the exact same tabs as what you were scrolling through before. Or you could even go into the 360 camera with a full 3-dimensional display of the car that shows you everything around you. And while all of that stuff may be fun, you guys know what one of my favorite parts of this car is. It's the audio system. Now, while I've said a lot of, stereos are great, this one I think takes it truly to another level. Not because of how many speakers it has, with only 17 speakers in this tiny little car. It's the fact it is a Bang & Olufsen stereo system. And what they do in terms of audio is just next level. Now, the screen may be one thing, but if you think Genesis stopped there, you're wrong. Move down a little bit, and not only do you have these beautiful metallic buttons at the very bottom of the upper console that are used for the majority of the major functions within the infotainment, but just above that is a very intriguing version of the Genesis dual zone climate control system. Okay, you have some physical normalities like your temperature control switches, defrosting, auto AC, air recirculation, you get the picture. But if you want to adjust your fan speed, where the air is going, you want to see what your actual interior temperature is, or even make the AC blow just at the driver instead of everywhere around the cabin. That's all contained within its own separate touchscreen. But my favorite piece is this little crystal ball right here in the middle. No, you don't roll your hand around on it to shift the gears. It actually inverts itself when you turn the car on, revealing the rotary shifter for your reverse neutral drive with the park button in the middle. Also inside of this car, one of my other favorite parts, is the ambient interior lighting system. Surprise, surprise, tried it on the G90 and also tried it on the GV60 crossover. Loved it in both of those. But it feels like it got even better in here. I don't know how, but it just did, because when you turn the system on, or at least when it activates through the standard lighting system, it just floods the floor panels with light, and then it peeks through the door sills and through certain elements here in the center console. The only problem I have with all of this is with so many electronic gadgets inside of this car, you do anything to make yourself comfortable, and that range is going to drain in a hurry. Now, despite being the smallest Genesis you can currently buy, I'm not going to lie, if I was a rear passenger in this car, with myself driving with the seat in its current position, it's actually not as bad as you might think. The headroom's actually a lot more optimal too, with the fact that the headliner back here is actually indented. A huge benefit if you're over 6 feet tall or right around there like I am. Now, there are a couple of downsides I must point out. The first of which is I can only fit maybe about 3 of my fingers between my knees and the unfortunate other complaint of mine, which is the back of the driver's seat and even the passenger seat, which are clad in plastic, not in the same sumptuous leather as the rest of the seat. However, if you think you're not getting any toys back here, you're wrong. You've got some chargers at the back, you've got heated rear seats, you've got these cool little sunshades should it get too bright outside, but the real party trick is what would happen if you are a rear passenger, or at least a rear occupant on the passenger side. Because if there's nobody sitting in the front right seat, you can push a little button on the side and tilt the whole seat forward. Or maybe you can adjust the backrest of the seat, or you can adjust the bottom of the seat. Almost anything can be done, but But the only problem is if you have someone sitting up there, well, either they're not going to like you very much, or if some of the other Genesis cars that I've tested do the same thing, that feature may not even work at all. And on that note, everybody, it's time to power things down a little bit as we conclude our review and drive of the brand new 2024 Genesis GV60. You know, I said in the beginning of this video that there are those of us who are really excited about stuff like this, and there are those of us that just aren't. And unfortunately, up until this week, I just could not embrace the idea of electricity becoming our main form of automotive propulsion. However, after spending a little bit of time here with the GV60, well, let's just say, you know, while I've enjoyed myself, I'm not quite there, but I am starting to see the prospects of it. However, if you've enjoyed what you've seen with the GV60 today, or perhaps you've learned something about it as well, give this video a thumbs up, and also while you're at it, hit the subscribe button down below, because trust me, stuff like this would never be possible, not only without subscribers and viewers like yourselves, but partnerships like Genesis USA. But at the end of it, guys, I hope you enjoyed the review, and I will see you all in the next one. Take care, everybody. Stay safe.